What is going on YouTube? This is Jim back with another video, here to do a deep dive of the Halo Infinite Inside blog for March 2021. This is all about audio. 343 is going to explain to us why and how they overhauled everything for Halo Infinite. I'm not just talking about sound design, I'm also talking about the sound engine and about sound effects. This is a radical overhaul of how we heard the game in Halo 4, how we heard the game in Halo 5 Guardians, and it seems like 343 is dedicating a significant amount of time to this. And that's really cool. So I want to spend some time on it today. I read through this. I understand it from a technical level. I'm going to try to break it down as simple as I can, because it is very, very complex. Maybe all my experience with the headphone reviews that I've done is giving me a little bit more of an insight into how sound design works, trying to unpack the Tempest engine on what the PlayStation 5 has been offering. So I'm starting to understand it all a little bit better. So sit back, relax, and listen, because I'm going to be playing some actual sound files from this blog, and we're going to dive into it together. But you know what you should also listen to? You should listen to that little voice in your head that says, subscribe. Maybe it's not so little of a voice, is it? All right, I do appreciate the support. So 343, going back to the blog format, this time talking all about audio. They have a Q&A with a bunch of the various audio designers and their roles and their responsibilities. The big thing that I took away from this, a couple things. Number one, they said they started working on sound redesign right after Halo 5, and they all agreed collectively they did not like the way Halo 5 sounded, which I personally enjoyed Halo 5 quite a bit. I really liked the soundtrack. Maybe that's why I was kind of jaded to that. But what they were saying was that the big battles, particularly with Warzone, or when you had a lot of firefights going on in a single area, and obviously Halo Infinite's going to, mirror this because it's an open world game. You're going to have these giant, playpens in which to fight. And this both really does apply to both single player and to multiplayer. I want to point that out. But keep in mind that, you're going to have these larger areas. Each game gets bigger and greater and grander in scope. And when that happens, you obviously have more sound effects at once. They said it was too much. It was too hard to distinguish what was happening because of the old sound engine design, and their, really that large part of that feedback was focused on that. I don't really remember hearing that much. I was a very big fan of the Halo 5 tournament scene, watching all the tournaments, the Halo's Championship League. I went to that one in Orlando, and I ranted and raved about getting to meet all the pros and how much I loved it. I got into Astro gaming and Astro headsets because they were the official sponsor. That's when I really started to understand audio in a much different way. So I don't ever remember hearing anybody ever complain about Halo 5's overall sound package, but apparently they felt that this was not a good entry and they want to fix it. So they talk a lot about that. They also talk a lot about the tone of it. And if you remember the phenomenal campaign, and I'm talking advertisement campaign, that was Halo 3, Believe, and all those really, really cool live interviews they did with like the museum curator and with other people who were impacted by the Chiefs fight. As you remember, by then it was on Earth. We were basically our backs to the wall. They talk a lot about how the words hope and believe, they want that to become more synonymous with the soundtrack again. I will definitely admit Halo 5 soundtrack has a much more techno type of sound to it, a lot more mechanical. We got a lot away from just kind of the basic chants and basic kind of light jazz, essentially, I would argue, that you saw in the previous Halo games. So they said they want to bring that back. They're using words like brighter, cheerier, more full of hope, full of victory. So I would expect to hear more fanfare type stuff along the lines of what we had from Halo 3 soundtrack, which was also phenomenal. So that'll be very interesting to see. And that also, as we get a little bit more of, as we get more into the soundtrack, we'll see how that impacts the mood of the game. But they then quickly shift into the actual sound engine itself. And this is where I think you're starting to see a major overhaul of kind of what the game is going to be about. So I'm not going to bore you guys too much with the waveform stuff, but it's important to understand because it helps paint the picture of what you're about to hear. So what they're arguing is that in previous games, the decay time, and decay time means when you first hear something, how long until it kind of fades out? Does it ramp down? They argue the decay time was too long. So here you can see a chart. Don't worry about the fact that they're duplicated. This is just left and right audio. That's irrelevant. Just look at one or the other. It doesn't matter. You see how when the audio starts, you see my cursor going nuts over here. Hopefully you can see my cursor, right? You see how when it starts, look how long it takes before the sound really comes back to complete flat. You're talking of a significant amount of time as it kind of ramps up, makes the explosion or the sound, and then it fades away. This part in particular here is what they refer to as a decay time. So they want to tighten that up. And they said the reason why they felt Halo 5 in particular did not have a great sound profile is because you had a lot of decay overlapping each other. And you would have multiple shots incoming at once. You would have multiple explosions, multiple enemies, but you weren't really finished processing the previous sound effect before you heard the next one or the next one or the next one. And keep in mind, this sound would replicate for every single thing. So if you're firing an M4A1 fully automatic, every single shot would be producing a very, very similar waveform to this over and over and over and over. And that's where you're getting that rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. So imagine that waveform just repeating again and again and again. Now, obviously, there is something cool about having 4 or 5 Spartans shoulder to shoulder going bananas on a singular opponent using their machine guns. Sometimes you may interject other weapons like the battle rifle, the DMR, the shotgun, whatever. When you start to interject those, then what they're saying is because of these long decay times, you're having a lot of overlapping waveforms and it's hard to distinctly tell what's going on, okay? So this is what they have done for Infinite. So I'm going to show you, look at this top graph compared to the bottom graph. Yes, it hits a little bit harder. I would argue the peak is a little bit higher here. But look how fast it drops off. Very, very, very rapid decay time as opposed to the other way. And I think what they're arguing is that it's going to allow you to more distinctly, accurately pinpoint what you are listening for, and it's going to make each weapon sound more distinct. So proof is in the pudding though. So this is a comparison of the Halo 5 battle rifle to the Halo Infinite battle rifle. This is heard from the third person perspective. So imagine you're standing on a hill next to your buddy and they are shooting at an enemy standing next to you. This is what it currently sounds like in Halo 5. We're going to go ahead and play that right now. I'm going to play it a couple times so you could hear it. And what I want you to listen for is that echo after, that reverb effect. Okay. Now I want you to listen to the Halo Infinite battle rifle sound. It does sound different to me. There is an echo in both, but it definitely does sound different to me. They also have included Halo 5's battle rifle in first person versus Infinite first person. So we'll go ahead and listen to those as well. Let's go ahead and listen to the Infinite battle rifle now. So it's that crisp distinctness that they're going for, along with it definitely sounds more mechanical, no doubt about it, but it also does definitely have and you can see it from the waveform here. I mean, this isn't lying. You can definitely see that the waveform does greatly impact how it sounds. So they have, in fact, tightened that up. Now, that is the first part of it. That's only one part of it. That's the fact that they're going to make the sound effects sound more crisp. It's much more readily available. You can instantly tell what you're listening to, as opposed to some of the other Halo games they're saying sounded a little sloppier. I don't really know. I don't really think that's true, honestly. I didn't really have, like I said, a huge issue with it, but I understand it. I'm just trying to explain it to you guys. Now, this is where it gets really technical, and I'm not going to overly explain this, but it's important to understand. What's going on in this chart here is how they are going to be changing the way you hear sound based on what they call the propagated path versus the direct path. Think of it this way. How many times have you played a game that has directional audio where you're standing on the other side of a wall from somebody? Think of any first-person shooter you've ever played. Modern Warfare, Overwatch, Apex Legends, Titanfall, you name them. Any first-person shooter. What happens is the game just basically puts a cone around you, and they say, okay, everything in this, or not a cone, a sphere. Everything in this sphere you're going to be able to accurately hear around you. Well, if somebody's on the other side of the wall from you, think of how it would emulate in real life. You know, you don't necessarily hear people on the other side of the wall trouncing around as clearly as you would, say, standing next to you. That's what this propagated path is designed to do. And it's going to say, yes, you should still be able to hear. Most games do what they call this direct path mapping. So in other words, you're hearing, you know, no matter there's an object or not there, the game doesn't really accurately understand that. It may try to dampen the sound slightly, but it doesn't really know how. They are saying that they have figured out a way with this propagated path, and this would be just like an open window or something. They have found a way to emulate this sound effect a little bit better. Time will tell if that's true. Now, what they have done here, and you can see this giant grid that they have overlaid, is they are doing, this is like a voxel debug view. So this is very common in games to see, like, is there an invisible wall, or like, where does the game actually think it's taking place? What they are doing here is they are looking for intersect points on where objects touch each other, and they're trying to map dynamically where sound effects should occur. So if you're standing up here on this yellow piece and an enemy's standing down here, most games would just instantly take that sound and just transform it right through here, through this wall, which obviously you can't really do. But what Halo is saying they're going to do is they're going to be able to make kind of like a lift up a little bit, and then it's going to come over. And that is supposed to make the sound more realistic, because it'll be a little bit more dampened because they're down here, because this wall would echo some of the sound effects back. It wouldn't completely go all the way up to the top. Some of them would bounce back. It remains to be seen whether or not this is going to work. This is a big, big part of their new design. And they use this, particularly as I mentioned, the reverb part of it is what, the reverberation. And they say it here, if a segment of the propagated sound path traveled through a large room, we will apply a proportionally larger reverb to the sound. If another segment travels through a small hallway, which, like you saw here, imagine this little window or something, through a small hallway, we'll apply appropriately narrow reverb to the sound, which should create a natural blend of multiple reverbs as a player listens to go through the environment, giving them a sense of more spatial awareness. That's the key, spatial awareness. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, you're talking about full Dolby Atmos support. And sure enough, in the very next paragraph, they talk about how they will be supporting Dolby Atmos, Windows Sonics, and DTS Headphone X support. In other words, mapping will not just be directional standard stereo left and right. You will now have up and down behind you. So if you have a good pair of headphones, you should be able to more accurately depict where an enemy is, as opposed to just the standard, are they more to my left or more to my right? This is a really, really big deal, and this shows a radical shift in how games are being designed. Some of the best games that have the best sound design in the world suffer because they're put on a subpar platform. And I've done a lot of sound audio reviews on PlayStation 5's Tempest engine and how they tried to emulate their own version of Dolby Atmos and how bad it fails on so many levels. So the fact that the Halo team is sitting down and trying to code to major standards like this is a really big deal. And it will, with the right equipment, radically change the way you listen, radically change the way you play. Now, I am really, really, really excited for that, and I think that is a huge deal in of itself. But they don't just stop there. That was interesting enough as it was. The other piece they talk about, and they do talk about the skewer, which does have some sound effects for this new weapon, And I guess maybe it was up a little bit higher. I don't want to talk about the skewer just yet. I can't find it in the blog post. Where does it talk about it? We'll just look at this waveform here because this is probably the best place to explain it. What they're going to do is, if they're in the old games, if you were standing here, let's say there were like 6 Spartans all standing here shooting at you, right? It would play all 6 of them of equal sound effects. In other words, each of the 6 would be heard from the same distance from you, and they would all be of the same volume, the same reverb, all that stuff. They said that that was too much to process from an audio perspective. And what they want to do is, let's say only one of those 6 Spartans is shooting at you, they will be louder than the other 5. I am not entirely sure I like this approach. What this is doing is it's taking a virtual sampling of the sound and it's telling you what it thinks you should be listening to the best. This could create some spatial distortion because if you are not looking directly at where the game is processing the sound the most, you may get almost like, you know, like the virtual reality lag. You may almost get like a sound lag, essentially. And I don't know how that's going to play out. Now, I've read all the testimonials here. Everybody says they love it. I guess it will remain to be seen. But they are going to prioritize for you what they think you should be listening to more than anything else. And they say, according to them, that this will actually increase your awareness and it's a better system to play in. Now, whether or not that comes to be true or not remains to be seen. I cannot wait to play this now and just play with the sound for a really long time. But keep that in mind, that the game is going to prioritize for you what it thinks you should be listening to the most. Again, I'm not sure if I like that. They then talk about, they got a new weapon coming out called the skewer, which you can read all about. I just read it actually in the book. They actually talk about the book a little bit further down. It was a weapon featured prominently in one of the newer Halo novels. But what they do is they're just showing how they generate waveforms, you know, and they break it down into different pieces. So you have the impact portion, the mech portion, the sci-fi portion, the Talus portion. And what they try to do is morph them all together into one waveform. So the skewer, being a power weapon that has a slow rate of fire that deals a whole lot of damage, lets us stray away from our core design process and go way over the top with it. And I think this guy did a killer job, and here is everything played together. So when you get your hands on the skewer, this is what it's going to sound like. Pretty ferocious sounding. And you can see here where they break down all, like I said, they're laying things on top of it. But the key here being that it's a power weapon. That's the difference. And this goes back to their core design philosophy. We want to make guns sound distinctly different from each other. That sound will rip through anything else you're hearing at the time. If you're hearing smaller arm fire, grenade launchers going off, that sort of thing, those will drown out to something like this. And the fact that this has such a big, long sound effect with a pretty long tail afterwards, you're going to hear it anywhere on the map. And that's what they want you to be aware of. Collectively, a skewer is on the battlefield. It is now the focus priority target, or we need to be spatially aware of where it is, because this thing will clearly mess us up. So that is a very interesting philosophy. They go on to talk about some of the other ways that they created all these sounds with different hammers, and this was a very interesting video, in case you're wondering how they generated some of the sound effects, you know, making, you know, just trying different things, throwing a bag of nails down a staircase or shooting a gun into a well. There's a lot of that really interesting things now too. And I'm really curious to see, you know, how this all comes together. I do believe this is going to be a radical overhaul of everything we know about core Halo, and people are gonna love it or hate it. I am one of the people who absolutely adored what they did with Halo 4 from a technical standpoint. The heft of the Spartans, the guttural machine sounds of the Warthog and the machine gun and the DMR. It was very mechanical and very rough sounding. They clearly toned that back for Halo 5 Guardians, and it sounds like now they're coming back, maybe at least halfway, to what Halo Infinite's going to be. But This is all goodness. The fact that they are taking their time to redesign and not just to say, hey, we had a sound engine that works, let's just throw some new stuff on here, but to radically change integration of Dolby Atmos, radically change spatial sound awareness, radically change the way waveforms are heard and prioritized. I really want to believe. I think the last picture actually was the believe thing. Or was it hope? I want to believe. Oh, that's become. Okay. I want to believe that this will become, there we go, something we can all truly appreciate and enjoy. So I know I went long today. Like I said, it was technical. I wanted to explain everything for posterity on this channel, but I also wanted to explain to everybody who may not read this or may not understand it that this is a massive, massive deal. I cannot wait to get my hands on this game. I cannot wait to put it through its paces on all my sound equipment and listen for myself. Hopefully, if the leaks are true, we'll be playing it in less than 9 months. Whew. One can hope. That is it for today's video. I know it was long. I hope you guys found it informative. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.